All right, now we're really live. And this is David Rovix with another episode of Fifth Estate Live, which comes to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we're coming to you on various platforms, including the Facebook pages of Popular Resistance and Cebu Community Radio here in Portland, Oregon, as well as my YouTube channel and on Twitter and VK, LinkedIn, Twitch, and it's also all archived at fifthestate.org, and you can also subscribe to the Fifth Estate quarterly, now these days quarterly print publication, which has been in existence in one form or another since sometime in the 60s. And you can find all of these interviews also archived in audio form at fifthestate.org, or if you look for This Week with David Rovix, wherever you get your podcasts. And I do other interviews with folks on other days of the week, usually at the same time. And today I'm very happy to be spending the hour with Jim Feast in Brooklyn, New York, who is a longtime Fifth Estate contributor and poet, author of various books, and also a former college professor and supermarket cashier, among other illustrious professions. Jim, great to have you on the show. I was, as I generally do, reading a whole bunch of stuff that you've written since, I got up this morning, and and I was just especially bowled over by an article you wrote in 2007 in Fifth Estate, and I don't want to put you on the spot to be remembering what you wrote in 2007, but it was just. I just thought it was some fantastic analysis, and I was wondering if we could just dive in and start with this question of the semi-proletariat, and the what you were writing about was specifically what really I found so captivating as a history buff myself is this idea of Marxist periods and anarchist periods of organizing, and how the different sorts of tactics lend themselves to different sort of historical junctures of where the working class is at and how it's organized. I mean, maybe I should start somewhere a little less less in the thick of things. But that article was I didn't even write down the title of it. But do you remember the one I'm talking about?
Hopefully I do. People, I had to say it's a tendency. I think I always see there's a tendency between different working groups that are organized. Instead of attacking, saying anarchists are better than Marxists or vice versa, maybe they affect a different segment of the working class. There's a funny thing, maybe this is that article, Engels said something about, well, these anarchists, all they do is hang out. They just know the lumpen and the seasonal workers. Okay, but maybe the seasonal workers now, maybe that's what the anarchist message flows more forcefully to them, to people that are but that used to be, Engels and those consider this an audience that will never form any kind of strong progressive movement. But now gig workers, those are the dominant part-time workers and contract workers are the dominant group within society now, within the workers, I believe. Whereas the Marxists, the Marxists organized people like they had jobs at factories, 9 to 5, they had big, strong unions. Whereas if you look at, for example, another more marginal, people don't think of it this way, but there are a lot of groups such as garment workers in New York City and Lower East Side, turn of the century. This was actually seasonal work in a weird way. They would work when they had, before Christmas, and for certain months of the year they were off. And the unionists for many years said, we can't organize them because they start organizing right before they without a union, they would immediately start organizing and striking as soon as they went back to work. When the manufacturers needed them to work, they would suddenly start organizing and going on strike. then the union would continue. They would form a union. It would fall apart at the end of the season, you know. So, but I mean, that's not a good way to organize. But I'm saying they had different methods. Seasonal workers sort of had different, not necessarily workable methods of organizing, you know. But then we look at the Wobblies. This is the central thematic center of the U.S. As far as anarchistic organizing. And they were, again, they didn't exclusively do this, but they all organized among timber wolves, people that went, you know, did cutting down trees at a certain season, and people that, you know, they travel around on box cars, so they call them hobos. Actually, these were seasonal workers moving across the country. So they had to work out the Wobblies had different, you know, much more less respectful authority than the general unions in the bigger workers where they had, you know, 9-to-5 jobs. And I feel that they also involved in artistic activities to the extent that there were a lot of great songs among the Wobblies. You know, you don't think of it as our good union songs, but I think the anarchist Wobblies were at the forefront of socialistic, progressive, anarchistic songwriting and stagecraft. Even they put on people know this or not. They put on a big. This doesn't fit the stereotype I'm giving, but the Wobblies, they're called to the East Coast for textile union strikes, and so they put on events. Like one thing they put on in Madison Square Garden, I think it was Lawrence or Patterson. They put on a huge kind of play showing that, you know, how the bosses were clamping down, but at the same time they put on they had but they had a huge amount of the workers in the play. I mean, they like workers have gone from like we are, you know, we're going on strike. We've been working hard conditions. Then they're on the stage acting out the hard conditions and going on strike on the stage. So
they called it a pageant, right? The pageant or something.
Beyond performance art in a way, I think. You know.
Really, yeah, really. What a combination of the rank and file and the performance and merging all of that, which was such a part of the times. But how and you write about the common culture that the songs of the IWW and the other artistic creations of the union, that the common culture was a vital thing.
We don't have. Maybe we have a limit on, but back in the days of populism, and it was a little earlier, and the IWW, they had the philosophy. There's a haves and the have-nots. You know, that was what we're fighting. We're not fighting over, at least them. You know, we're not fighting over race or other, you know, ethnic differences. We're fighting. There's a rich and there's a poor. That's what you have to understand, and people understood it. You know, look at that culture has been kind of to try to erase it. Look at the Wizard of Oz. Remember Wizard of Oz? This is a populist play put on at populist events because it was about going to the Emerald City, i.e. money bucks Wall Street, and then like let's get the farmers, which is the scarecrow, the workers, the Tin Man. You know, I forget who the line was, but they all marched there to try and bring down Wall Street. I mean, this play was. And that was what it was obviously about. They put it on at event. The populists put this on as one of their recruiting tools. You know, now it's been like bowlerized to the point of like insanity. But the general distinction was, I believe, between those who have money and we don't, and we have to, and we make, you know, we the workers and the poor, we create everything, and now it's stolen from us. That's the obvious insight that we have to base our arguments on. You know, not that we don't also fight over racism, sexism, those things are all important too. Central, you know, but that's part of, you know, racism. You know, they analyze part of, and it has to be fought against, but it's part of the ruling class method of divide and conquer. You know,
it is, and it's just has been jumping out at me so much in recent weeks with a lot of the reporting on NPR.
You're kind of breaking up, so I guess this is not so good.
Right. I wonder, how close are you to your router? Are you as close as you can be to the router?
I could get closer. Could I do that?
Yeah, good idea. Take that device closest possible to the router.
Okay.
Yeah, so you are tuned in to, we'll just just mute him for a moment, and you are tuned in to Fifth Estate Live, which comes to you every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific, or every Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are talking with poet, author, editor, professor Jim Feast in Brooklyn, New York.
Dark here. What?
Yeah, maybe there's a light there.
Turn the light on.
I think that's going to be better for both of us to hear each other there. Yeah, probably. Maybe just lower the screen so we can see a little more of you. Yeah, good. Jim, so one thing, I don't know if I'm skipping around too much here, but I have that tendency. But along with the analogies, the many commonalities between the current historical moment and the IWW period, which I think there's more and more similarities in so many ways in terms of now in the age of the robber barons and the semi-proletariat. I mean, are you still having trouble hearing me?
Yeah, but then it comes and goes. Sorry, I guess.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's why I'm leaning.
You're coming through.
Okay.
Well, Jim, talk about surrealists, situationists, and unbearables.
Actually, I left my paper in the other room.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no worries. Get your paper. Talking to Jim Feast in Brooklyn, New York, and
yeah. Okay. No, but
you were mentioning surrealists, situationists, and unbearables, and I think I know as many situationist slogans are so relevant all the time, but talk about their relevance right now as you see it.
Well, there's a guy, Ron Cohn, that I work with, and we wrote from the Unbearables, and we wrote this manifesto, and the first line is only one important. It's no avant-garde without street action. By that I mean all these, minus U.S. groups, all these groups such as the surrealists, they did actions. They didn't just write poetry, paint paintings. They did things to disrupt society in a positive or negative way. For example, the surrealists, along with painting and this, there was a guy named Maurice Barres, who was a seeming liberal writer, but then became a conservative. So they put on a trial. He didn't come, of course, but they dressed up as judges and this and that and tried him for betraying the working class. So, I mean, then another example of this, I guess this might be considered factionalism, but Chirico was one of the great surrealist painters, but they felt he'd become a sellout and commodifying his work the way that Dali usually was considered doing later. So they put on when he was having a big event at some kind of pricey bourgeois gallery, they put on their own gallery show where they parodied his works as an attack on selling out to the money men. That was so. In other words, these surrealists did not just sit around, paint pictures, and write poetry. They actually did events to protest the commodification of culture. I think the situationism, one thing they talked about was like everything is being our enjoyment, our leisure hours are being controlled by we sit in front of a TV, we go to a sports thing, everything is highly organized. I give an example myself when I talk to people, like they go like, "Oh, I love these video games." Wait a minute, a video game, you can only do what they let you do. You can't say, "Okay, now let's have a," So you're being controlled. So they said, let's find ways of, along with all our other important ideas and thoughts. The situation said they invented something called the derive, which was that you drift. You get a group of friends, has to be done in a group, and you drift through the city. You wander and you look, because they said, in a commodified world, everything is programmed. The TV is programmed. The computer games are programmed. But what if you just look for adventure and mystery in a group, wandering through the city, taking, and finding, we found, the Unbearables found that this always leads to bizarre, important and interesting coincidence. The Chicago Surrealists, let me quote a very brief passage. They also were always involved. There's a book edited by Ron Sokolsky, great book, and he wrote the introduction, which is 100 pages long, and tells you everything you need to know. It's long enough. It's twice as long as no. But it's filled with so much great stuff. This guy's an incredible writer, this Ron, and he says, he goes, they're putting up this called some kind of Clyde Oldenburg, Mr. Conformism. They're putting up some sculpture called the Bat Column in Chicago, right? On stage were not only temp mayor Michael Blandick, but quoting from Sodowski, Joan Mondale appearing as sort of Lady Bountiful. The Surrealists were there too. Picket signs and a leaflet said, "No hits, no runs, all errors," because it's like a giant baseball bat, he put it, right? In which Oldenburg is described as one of the decade's leading loathsome grovelers. And this public sculpture looked like a billy club. So instead of a baseball bat, they put it up as a billy club. So they protested and got kicked out and carried out. So this Unbearables in New York, we organized to do the same kind of double features of attacking what we found was commodified parts of culture, and doing events that would change people's perception of what's going on around them in public. So number one, we had a beat conference. Here's the thing: we didn't, the beats. We know the great beat writers, and we honor them. We have nothing against them, but the fact that they began like appearing like one of them major figures. He's in a Gap commercial. Another one's on broadcasting for ITT. Is this what the beats are being commodified? That's what we had. This one of our members, Yuko Otomo, said, like, she had this theme: fame, name, money game. Like something like that. Like, they use once you use your name to make money into, like, another guy said, like, this guy Bart Plantenga said, they just try to create wannabeats. Not people striking out on their own new artistic directions. They're trying to get clones. So you had this. So the NYU in 1995 has a conference on Jack Kerouac, and so we said we'll put on our own conference, and we put this guy. Here it is. The Beats Sell Out, written by Alfred Vitale, one of our members. He goes, just briefly, here's what we said: they're Unbearables in direct protest of the Beats, who have gladly acquiesced to selling out and seeing the commercialized commodification of their work by NYU, and partaking in this expensive farce, are staging counter events during this year's Kerouac Beat Conference. Unlike the NYU conference, our events won't cost $140 for you to attend, or $75 for those who are already paying $16,000 a year to go at NYU. And Alfred says, join the Unbearables as they point out the hypocrisy and commercialized beat worship and the beats who love it.
And this was in the 90s? Was this in the 90s?
1995.
Because, I mean, that's especially notable because back then it was very common to have expensive events for free on college campuses. They had a lot of money on the campuses in the 90s, and they invited a lot of speakers and performers to lots of college campuses where the event was free for students. I remember because I was performing at them at the time. So having such an exclusive event at that time was even more unusual, I think, than it would be now. But that's how. So the role of.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
One of the amazing coincidences. So we go. They're going to have an expensive Jack Kerouac West Village tour. So we said, okay, we'll put on our own tour across the street and show. And like one of our members, Sparrow, had a sign: find out where Jack Kerouac got his kitty litter. So we start. This is why I said there's these odd coincidences that the Surrealists kept talking about. So meanwhile, Jan Kerouac, Jack's daughter, is there, and because there's a dispute. I don't know if it's a long story, but there's a dispute over the. She got no money from the estate, and there's a dispute between her and the wife. And she was there with Gerard Nicosia, who wrote Memory Babe, like the great biography of Kerouac, and he's on her side. So they got kicked out of the conference for complaining. So here they are. They see us marching by. They go, "What do you guys? Oh, we're protesting. Let's join you." So here we are. We're on the pseudo beat tour with Jan Kerouac lecturing with us, and whereas everybody were paying all this money to go on the real, NYU Jack Kerouac.
I love it. And there's his daughter with you guys.
His daughter with us and giving talks on Kerouac as we go along.
Fantastic.
Meanwhile, with us giving like odd, facts and phony factoids. And second, one other odd of these coincidences occur if you disrupt the conventional world around you. I think the Unbearables invite you to join a vocal protest again from Vitali. A protest of the beat sellout and shameless commercialized thing they have become. It's a huge high. This was not even part of the beat conference. As part of the conference, you had to pay more to $50 to go see all these famous beats reading at town hall. So Alfred said, bring your poetry and help us put free back in free verse. So here we are in front, protesting in front of on the front, next to the town hall. And who happens to be passing by? Corso. You know Corso? You know who I'm talking about now? Okay.
Probably the poet?
Yeah, the poet.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the great beat writers, but he's also kind of like, he was a drug addict, this and that, and he didn't fit the profile, right? So he's walking by to read at the conference where they're paying $50. He goes, you guys, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You're not real poets like me. You just kind of want to get on our coattails. And so Sparrow goes like, oh yeah, well I can write better poetry than you. Why don't you recite something right now and I'll come back. So Corso starts reciting a poem on the sidewalk.
Great.
Corso is like dressed like a bum, like he always does. So people like to going in their fur coats and tuxedos to come. They see this guy reciting. They're like, hi. They're walking in the gutter to get away from him. They're paying to see him.
Wonderful. I remember actually playing a gig one time where that there were some punks outside of the venue that I was going to be playing in, and I was hanging out with them and noticing people coming to the gig who were avoiding us because clutching their purses as they walked in. And it was yeah. Did you end up getting any response from the corporate media for stunts like that?
I didn't hear what you said. It's funny. If you talk a little bit, the beginning I don't hear, then I hear everything else. So if you keep talking.
Do you have headphones? There's compression. I think compression is the problem here. Do you have? You could put on headphones to your no. If you have any, it would help.
Let me try that. Okay, hold on one second.
Yeah. So you are tuned to Fifth State Live, and which comes to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we are trying to work out some ongoing technical problems.
Okay, I'm gonna have to move this around to find the.
Yeah. I'll just. Yeah, we're just standing by, and Jim is plugging in his headphones, and hopefully we'll be able to hear us. The ideal is that we can both hear each other. Let's see. All right, headphones on.
No problem.
How's that going? You can hear me better now?
That's perfect.
That's always ideal when we can hear each other if we're having a conversation. Yes, it's good.
Sign language. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, sign language. We could always. Yeah, if we were more versatile. I don't know sign language either, but yeah. Did you ever get any corporate media for these kinds of stunts? It just sounds like it would have been perfect if anybody was doing a documentary at the time. But did you ever attract any corporate media attention doing?
I think the people are afraid when you become too much of an anarchist. I don't think they. But we there's a movie was made about the Beats, and it's very humorous. It's kind of a poorly made movie where they have Johnny Depp reading Kerouac or something like this. But one scene, they're at the conference and they have the camera panning along, and suddenly it speeds up because they're showing actually that's where we were staying with the protest signs. So when it got to us, the camera went by very quick, so it wouldn't be seen apparently to see that there's no dissent. We don't want any dissension in this world.
That's what it was like generally in the 90s with media, right? Later they started paying attention for some reason. Like when Cindy Sheehan in Texas and Occupy Wall Street, there was a lot of media. But in the 90s, they just completely ignored us. That was their tactic, it seems, looking back at it. I don't know if you have the same take on it.
Well, so be it. I want to bring up the other type of event we did, which was because that was a protest. We also did like as the Situationists did events to like find a new way and a subversive way to spend your leisure time. We decided to have readings on the Brooklyn Bridge, and
Great.
We did them for like 12 years in a row, but they weren't like set up like a poetry reading where you all stand in one place. We set up each poet. We got in twos. We all went up the whole length of as far as we could go, up the length of the bridge, and read our poems. So people passing by, which most people didn't stop on, they would pass by. They would hear like parts of our poems as they walked by, and they would like get a poem. The one thing about there's a guy, Peter Lamborn Wilson, who writes for FD, and who's an extraordinary writer, and he developed the idea of temporary autonomous zone, right, in which for a few minutes, or a few hours, you disrupt without notice. You disrupt the average everyday life, what's going on, milieu, by doing something that it's hard to place what the hell's going on. So what we didn't tell when you do a Brooklyn Bridge reading, we didn't put publicity out. We did not sell tickets. We just appeared without permits again. So we were. It makes it more exciting and dangerous. Without first few times, we thought the police will come and throw us out just for being on, reading poetry. It could be against the law. I don't know, in New York. So, but we would stand there, and and people would go, "What the hell is going on?" They would like wonder, and we try to like present poetry in a way it can never be presented, because everything has to be commodified in our culture. How can you have a poetry reading, which would be hard? You can't sell tickets to go across the Brooklyn Bridge, I don't think. So we did things but therefore we have a freedom that those who are always looking to make a buck don't have that freedom, We also
I love it.
Yeah, we give a reading.
They call that a flash mob these days.
Yeah,
you called it
yes.
Yeah. Would you give us a poem, Jim? Did you you got anything prepared?
Hold on. Actually, I moved my books over here. What am I saying?
Of course. You moved into a different room. Oh, there you go.
Book that came out right lately. Let me read just one. I wrote down some of their like songs because I was always I couldn't be like you. I couldn't be a real great songwriter, and I can't write music, so I just write sound like songs. So this is a more. Let me. When I got some that actually are. Then I figured out after a while. Why don't I just take famous songs and then put my words to them. So hold on.
Are you getting an instrument too? No. Just.
I know it sounds totally mismanaged because my wife. It's my wife's. There she is. Can you see it? This is I did it with my wife. She's a Chinese immigrant she's one of the boat people from Vietnam. So I wrote a book about our years together. We've been together 35 years. But I said, why don't I just take famous songs and then I'll stick my own words on them? Because I can't write music. So this song, there's a song, Spanish Harlem Incident. You know the song by Bob Dylan? Mm-hmm. So this is about my wife. Just to explain, she's Chinese, and Cholo, and I call it Cholo, means Chinatown in Chinese. You ready? You all ready?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cholon girl, the streets of your quartier have never lost their charm, though the air war has moved southward and the men never put down arms. Does it matter? All around us, the whole world is down on its knees, that the land is torn and fragile, and the emptiness knows no peace. Your long face and your long fingers, your small eyes and your small breasts, as you turn, I can feel you tremble as you're seeking a place to rest. Does it matter? There's a situation that has cut the patties with scars so deep that the night must perform its function and dark the candles so we may sleep. I know the world. It is all around me. I know the world. It's behind my head. Chinese woman, you don't have to show me. Can't you show me yourself instead? Can't you show me yourself instead? Song.
Jim, the when you've written a lot about a lot of different historical events that have occurred, and I'm just wondering, as you look at the events of the past week, Anything come to mind in
Well,
terms of
go ahead.
history? Yeah, historical parallels or any other thoughts?
Well, there's a God, back in the 30s, Marcuse wrote this essay that comes out in Negations, where he kind of points out, like, what do you do? What does the rulers do if you're in a situation where you can't deliver the goods? Like people at least for those who had jobs, which is, and not counting minorities, in the 50s, 60s, the workers could make some money and they could buy, cars and TVs. But now, because of a crunch in profits or whatever, they can't afford to like give good jobs. The rulers, if they want to make a good profit, they can't give people money, so they have to give them a ideology, a racial kind of ideology you know, racial and sexist ideology in order to replace having objects to buy or whatever. So I think that's what people, you're going to either go, if you have in your situation where you find out this the system sucks, you can either become an anarchist or like a fascist. I think, like but right now, I think the big this is just my own opinion. A big thrust of the last 20 years has been to like individualize and make people anonymous to each other, and to break all the community activism that people like you and FE try to support. To keep our minds even off it. If your mind, again, the presidential race is with a crazy man like Trump around is central, but people like they spend all their time thinking about national politics, but what about what's going on in your own community and all the things. Without unions that used to have union halls, but they're all kind of community centers. There's a famous, what's the book called? Bowling Alone. This guy came out with years ago, pointing out that like there's less and less community contact, less and less friendship, and I think that's magnified and amplified by having Facebook and all these like what we're doing right now. But a lot of things are like trying to break the bonds between people. That's central. All these things. I have relatives that go visit them back before COVID, when you could visit it, and like the kids, they're like in high school, but they're playing games hour after hour. I could see doing for half hour. These games are so boring to me, but that's cutting yourself, and they play with other people or like online with them, I guess. But what does that think about what that's doing to your mind? You're following. I mean, the game has limited amount of things. You can beat the villainous Russians or whatever, but you're limited in what you can do by what they allow. So you're following patterns laid out by the authorities, and your friends are joining you doing it. It's like you might as well join the army if you want to get like discipline like that. But yet it's made, and it is exciting. I'm sure it's exciting, I guess, but people are doing. But there's ways to limit your true interface in a non-commodified way, with others, and that means that you're more liable to be, instead of becoming anarchist, which is your natural thing to do if you're like lost your job and you're finding the system is like screwing you left and right. Instead, you become like a fascist. Those are the choices. It's not. I don't think it's like socialism or barbarism. I think it's like anarchism or fascism. If you're at the bottom, because again, if you're a worker and you got a job, it's good. Let's become a Marxist, and because you're fighting for your union. But if you're an anarchist, no, you have a gig job, the anarchist organizing methods are best. But we don't have the troops, because we've been weakened by years of this, Like
No
I said,
doubt.
yes. So that's why. But you could say to me, another way to also look at it. Well, here's Trump. Doesn't this forget Trump in the sense of like his terrible personality? Doesn't this seem to mean that the leaders of our country, if they have to elect him to get in a job, that seems like their whole organization is disintegrating. The control at the top seems to be disintegrating if they have to get a con man to do their bidding because nobody wants them anymore. That's one thing we know about the rabble down below. They hate the Democrats and they hate the Republicans. Even with Trump, they like Trump, but they hate Republicans. That group.
Yeah.
They at least realize that that the system is no good, but instead they pick a con man instead of a Bernie Sanders or someone. But there's not that. But they could have gone to Bernie Sanders. I believe.
I mean, this is like everything you're saying is what I have been saying all the time for the past few weeks. But I wonder, but this is not how the like National Public Radio and CNN represents things, you know? And you probably are watching mainstream media and you see how they portray what's happening. And what do you think of that? And what is their agenda? How are they describing these events and what are they up to? Because they're not describing them the way you're describing them, are they?
Well, I think there's like a bound. What you know the term they got it from economics, or I got it from bounded rationality. Like that. That's like the central way to is like you have to keep your options limited, so you only think about certain things. Like I said earlier, you only think about national politics. You don't think about your own politics in your city like so much. You know, you got your mind focused on that, and it's got understandable reasons why that is. But I think the same with the network. So now, if Trump goes down, this will help the Democrats. That's the only thing I think about. Wait a minute, what about local organizing? What about my city? That's what we should. That by bounding your rationale, you don't think about, hey, maybe politics is not all that important, even though it's destroying our lives. Instead, are there other things equally or more important than what's being described on TV? I think.
And speaking of that,
Free.
what's been happening locally? Have you been getting out of the apartment, or does the pandemic keep you inside, or what's going on in New York, in
Well,
your world of your part of New York?
well, we live in like I said, my wife is of 35 years is Chinese, so we live in a Chinese neighborhood, which everybody, it's like kind of like a not humorous, ironic and sad. We we walk. Sometimes we take a long walk, and we happen to go through a Hasidic neighborhood. Cautiously, that's one of the areas where they don't believe in masks. So you walk from an area with the Chinese where everybody's got like two masks on and a face shield, and then you go to the Hasidic neighborhood, they're all out in the streets, no masks. For some reason, it's not Hasidics, it's the fundamentalists in general don't seem to believe that even though their groups are dying. I mean, they even had, so we're kind of in a mixed neighborhood. We stay in the Chinese sections, but we don't, everything poetry's all Zooming and this and that. It's kind of like, it's lacking the community we used to have. So people like you are keeping it alive. I think I just, in things you see when you go into there's other non-conforming to mask-wearing whites in our area still, and you see, like I see a couple of them a few days ago, still going on, still walking to the 7-Eleven where I get coffee without their mask after we told to go out. I see a couple walking along, a white couple, arm in arm, no mask, and the woman's got a sweatshirt saying "Make the world a better place." I mean, how can you make the world a better place? You got no mask on, and you're pushing past people in the supermarket, not the supermarket, near the outdoor supermarket. So they got these hardheads that won't wear a mask for other people's protection. It's kind of like they I guess they believe it's symbolic of not conforming, but I think a person pushed down like in the lower group that lost their job or has bad problems, they can't make the decision to, hey, which is a real deep level choice. Hey, why don't I get involved in political activism of some sort? So because they refuse to make a real move toward freedom, they think of some kind of minor, tiny, pointless thing as like not wearing a mask. That's their freedom. But they don't choose, hey, why don't you be really free and get out there and protest with Black Lives Matter? That they would never do because they don't want to face any freedom with repercussions. They want this not, you can walk in a store and get yelled at and you go out, but there's no real repercussion. If you put yourself up against the forces of the establishment, you might suffer. So they don't want to make a real choice. They want to fetishize like unreal freedom and give up on and pretend, hey, no, blacks are doing okay. No, it's all false. I've got a million excuses not to like partake in real social struggle, but I can do something like that show that I still have freedom. But you don't have any freedom if you don't make a choice to join a progressive group. That's my biased opinion.
You've in terms of the different views of freedom, you've also talked about the sense of solidarity that's in some workplaces and not in other kinds of workplaces, and depending on different kinds of places you've worked, where there's a sense of solidarity among your colleagues, and other places where everybody seems to be in competition.
Okay. Well, I love being not a professor, but an adjunct. But you know where the adjunct comes from? It's a Greek word. You want to know what it means?
Yes.
It means add one semester, junkum the next. That's a joke. So anyway, adjunct. Okay, but I think that so I in my book that it came out lately called "A Strange Awakening of Light That Takes the Place of Dawn" is about that kind of two kinds. I said like we. Of course, I always put no poetry. I put like an introduction where I yammer on about my theories. But the Greeks had like we go, oh, we love is important in America. We should all love each. You know, wait a minute. How come the Greek, if the word is important, don't you have a lot of uses of it? The Eskimos had like 20 words for snow because they have to analyze it. The Greeks have like 6 words for love. We only have one. That hints we don't really care that much about it. But the Greeks have a word eros, which is like partnership love and romantic love. But they also have a word xenia, which I'm mispronouncing, which is like solidarity. And, you know, for them, it's like with the city state. But I'm saying that's the kind of feeling you have in a workplace. It's a different kind of love, but it's an important love. You know, in fact, in your songs, I believe that you epitomize some traits. Like you have a song called Judy. And remember the song?
Mm.
Okay. So in that song, it's like, no, love is not all good times. It's like I think there's a bend in our relationship. Something's like going wrong a little bit, and things. But we go back. We have a personal history of good times and bads. We share that, and that's what makes up the history. You know, makes up the center of Eros. But then you have a song called Behind the Barricade. You remember this one?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that one, it's like as a songwriter, you're talking about the feeling of working in a group for progressive change, fighting, and there's also history, but it's a history of the whole of the national or the fight between like you'll go things they may be beating us now, or sometimes we're doing well. It's like you look at history in a bigger way. So
Mm.
both kinds of love involve. That's what you bring out in your song. Bring out a different era of history, you know, and to have a real personality, to not be one of these phony, you know, anti-mask waving characters. To have a real history, you have to involve yourself, a real human fullness. You have to involve yourself in both of those histories. The romantic, you know, or not necessarily romantic friendship, interpersonal history, and the history of members of those around you in struggle. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but I found,
Mm-hmm.
but I had this. My work history is this: I worked in a nurse's aide place, then I got fired for union organizing with my whole shift. Then I moved to New York, and I worked in a supermarket for years. And then, whatever reason, I get involved as an editor at a trade paper for years. And then I work as an adjunct. And I noticed, why is it that in those first 2 jobs, there's so much worker solidarity, so much, you know, like we would like, you know, spontaneous, you know, when the boss did something wrong, there would be spontaneous actions. There'd be a lot of humor at the boss's expense. There'd be like, you know, kind of like not sabotage, but it was, you know, unspoken resistance to speed up or whatever. This goes on, you know, like, or if you know, that went on all the time. Whereas, and then you get a job. Why is it that at there's not so much solidarity in a professional workplace? You know, why is
Mm-hmm.
that?
Mm.
And I think it's
What
like, go ahead.
What do you think? What
Well,
What
no,
was your?
I think one thing is the authority. You're fighting against authority more or less face to face in a job. And like if you're in a supermarket as a boss, he's saying like, you guys, you know, they would call us in our. This is like how bad things are now. They got computers. What is the use of computers? I found out they call your office. You know, the computer shows you only did so many customers per hour as a cashier. I said, what? You know, but which is like insane because wait a minute, this one customer had 1 item and the next one had 100 items, you know. So, so the computer doesn't really just makes the boss another reason to like threaten you, but he's not going to fire you because he, you know, why, you know, you have to train somebody for 2 hours. That's so much work. So, but you know, there's an authority system that you can fight against, and it's obvious, and you hate it, and you organize against it. If you work at a college, for example, there's just a, all the college, for one thing, there's like, they stratify you in a weird way. We know, I mean, that's, the workers don't agree, but there's adjuncts and there's full professors. So you're kind,
Yeah.
even if you feel, some colleges I've worked at, the full professors, they all look down on the adjuncts and they're all idiots. Meanwhile, some of us had, PhDs, et cetera. And yet, so we such idiots, we didn't publish as many articles as you did or any, but that stratifies you, that weakens your solidarity. But secondly, I worked at like a community college, much more solidarity within that rank, but the administrators will make rules, and who are they? It's not nobody in your whole department. We had a greatly exemplary situation happen in the CUNY system, which is like 15 colleges. Okay, so the administrators say we have to regularize. What if a student wants to transfer from this school to another? We have to regularize the system. So some colleges say have a foreign language requirement. Let's get rid of that, because then somebody transferring in from another college will have trouble. Or another school has a literature requirement. Get rid of all, dumbing down the whole curriculum, let's say, or the requirements rather. So every single, there's like 15 colleges. Every faculty governance committee voted against it. Then what happens? It goes through. So you don't have any, and who are these faceless administrators who they don't debate, they don't say, they just make rules and you have to follow them. So you can't sort of like focus your anger at the system very easily, I mean, then and plus, you're already divided the same, I think when I worked at I won't go into details, but I worked at a trade magazine, like talking about a trade for years, and suddenly a bunch of us get fired. Why? Because we're bought by another company. We're bought by Disney, and they fired everybody. Then Disney fired so many people, they hired me back, and I was back. Then we're bought by another company, and we're all laid off. We don't have the whole. They said, let's just shut the whole magazine down. So the boss, everybody's out. So it's like how can you fight? I mean, you can fight, of course, but you can't focus yourself in that kind of very strongly, I think.
It certainly doesn't work with traditional organizing. I mean, that's why what you wrote about the different types of workforces and different types of organizing was so, I thought, striking about the semi-proletariat. The semi-proletariat and the proletariat. We're in an age of the semi-proletariat again now, as you wrote.
Well, I think I write about, though, you have obviously, if you're anarchistically inclined, being in the semi-proletariat is going to be more helpful. Your mindset is more helpful. You're not going to be, there'd be we know that the history of the AFL, et cetera, they became, not et cetera, but the AFL, the union became very job conscious. They kept out, they became, we're going to protect our jobs, get more wages, keep blacks out, keep women, so they became like focused on their job and their own personal lifestyle connected to their union benefits, but once you're a gig worker, you don't have what do you have to defend? There's no, there could be in the AFL, you can say, well, I'm in the before the bad days, but I'm in the union, and the company's bad, but they give us benefits and this and that. You can't say that as a gig worker. You get thrown out you come in for a job, you're thrown out. That's what, that's why I think there's a lot of underlying cultural themes that come up that are not, they hide the working class component of it. There's all this, in the last 20 years, networking, how important is the network? Where does the theme of networking come in? Well, if you're a gig worker, you have to network because you don't know where your next job is. So you go on a job, half the time you're asked, you know about any job? Any other gig workers on your job? Like at the editorial job, I bounced around, any jobs come up next week, you become, and that should increase your disdain for any particular job because it's not there for you at all. There's no security there. But also, it should increase your organizing ability, except you're competing with these people. But I found we didn't compete that much. I found when you're asking if I had a job and I knew there's another opening coming up there next week, and I see a guy, yeah, come on, this happened over and over again. That's why I think they had another complaint in New York. Well, why are people in bars all the time? They're not going to operas or even gigs, of folk great singers like Dave Rovics, because Why? Because they go to the bar, you find out about job opportunities. You're not going there to drink. It's like, or you're not going there to meet. You find out, hey, is there any job coming up? This magazine next week. Are they got any? Oh, they're gonna. You're looking for. We do special issues at my magazine, so in comes a bunch of people we didn't know. They bring in more temps. So that's
Yeah.
what why bars are important. People not they love drinking, they do too, but they want to find more job opportunities. I think that's
Sure.
the key element.
Right. Sure. Gig worker hiring hall kind of day work. Yeah. And Jim, talk.
Go ahead.
What about the future? I'm just any thoughts on where things are going in any locally, nationally, globally? Where your fears and hopes about where things are going? I don't know. Just even in the next weeks, months, years.
Well, I've got friends that thought Trump was going to overthrow the government. I think that my limited understanding is that the fascist movement is not going to be successful unless there's a society is in more of a collapse than it is now. So real fascists did not. I mean, plus we don't have, even no matter what my friends telling me, in Germany they had demobbed troops from World War I that kept practicing, kept training, that had been in warfare, and that were recruited by the Hitler troops. We have a lot of, I guess, maybe ex-military have become right wing, but I don't think they have a real military presence. And secondly, they don't have support from above. I don't think we see Trump. That's the big thing. He's acting like surprised, and everybody says you shouldn't have been surprised. But in a way, I think he's surprised because he doesn't live in reality. I don't think does Trump want an overthrow and killing of the Pelosi? That would be they don't want, the upper groups don't want that. They want to threaten with that, but they don't, because that will be a disintegration of the whole system. It's already getting Trump in is already showing that the group ruling our country is disintegrating at a certain extent. So I think all we should get out of bonded rationality. I work for Nader. I don't know if I put this in a lot as an editor, and he ran for a third party, whatever, and there's books about how they try to stop third parties from growing. But if you want to go into anarchists, forget politics anyway. But if you want to go in politics, I think a third party of a labor party would be really necessary. Second, if obvious thing is when I was getting old, but when I was young, organizing workplaces or doing housing organizing, that's it's very necessary and useful, and it's also interesting and fun. I found. I don't know when we were at this when I worked at a nursing home, 90% of the people there were black. Nader talks about this. Is there's this, once people work together, that's when they not always there was great solidarity between black and white, because we were fighting a very bad administration at our nursing home. And then you find we began and you got to begin to reach out to those you're with. So I started going. I think I mentioned. I started one of my colleagues said, let's go down to she was a Baptist, black Baptist. We go to her church. This is I found a whole new culture, interesting, inspiring culture. You can reach out to these other cultures and find so much. I think we just have to keep reaching out and keep organizing. My wife is Chinese, and she so I met her. We started going to kung fu movies. I actually wrote something to talk about that. We don't have time today, but we
got a few minutes.
Kung fu movies, they have okay, let me give the little tiny rep. Tiny rep.
Tell it to us.
There's a book, Robert McChesney, called Rich Media, Poor Democracy. But he's got one statistic I found fantastic. In the 70s, foreign films are 15% of the U.S. would go to revenues of films. 15% were foreign films. Then you find out nowadays it's 0.1% in the U.S. But then you look for, I guess a lot of college professors were going to movies. No, what were the majority of these films being seen in the 70s were kung fu movies. One period in the 70s, 5 top films in Variety were kung fu movies. And kung fu movies are very, think these are made in Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a colony of England at the time. They're very subversive and anti-colonial. You know, the
Mm,
movie like Once Upon a Time in America, sorry, Once Upon a Time in China, Part One. These rich, these Americans are recruiting people to build the Gold Mountain. They're actually, you know, like, and they're really going to enslave them, and like the Chinese beat them up, beat their butts at the end. Now, like if you're a
great.
minority, okay. So the second thing is in the '70s we had 42nd Street. People go, oh, that was a porno theaters and that, but it actually went on 72nd Street, 42nd Street. For one porno theater, there are 5 film theaters showing kung fu movies. So the mass of the workers, those who were supporting China, were supporting foreign films, not the elite public, strangely enough. And these films, you know, they're un, they showed a workers' consciousness over and over. Can we got a second for I say this one thing?
Oh
There's
yeah,
there's a movie
please.
called, which inspired the Wu-Tang Clan. There's a movie called Return to the 36 Chambers of Shaolin Temple. And in the
Mm.
film, the hero, his parents are beat up by a gang of the ex, and he says, "I'm going to become a kung fu fighter," but he's not. You have to be a monk, so he sneaks his way in, and the guy catches him. He says, "No, you cannot join because you're not a monk." So he goes, "But you can help rebuild the place for a year, and maybe then I'll give you a chance to join." So he's building the place. They're up on these bamboo tenements and things like that. He's rebuilding the place, and he's watching as he builds. And then he finishes. I rebuilt the temple. Well, you're kicked out. You still don't make it. So he goes back to town. I lost. I'm no good. Suddenly the X gang comes. They begin beating him. He runs away, but he comes to a building site. And suddenly he grabs a pole. He begins everything he learned. Now he learned on the job, and he beats down the X gang, and they're all running like. And then they had great writers. The last line, you see everybody laying there crushed, and they go like, and he goes, and I only used 60% of my Shaolin skills, you know.
I love it.
And you think about that, and I used to go to these movies. Can you imagine? Hey, wait, what if you're black, Hispanic, etc.? Are you going to go to a movie? Think about your difference of a movie, and you're being oppressed totally in the '70s, and you're going to go to a movie and see some white cops beating up minorities, whatever, shooting Cuban drug dealers, or you're going to go to a Chinese movie where the Chinese are beating up white imperialists. You know,
Much better.
what? Now that's the message in those movies. You know, over and over. I'm not exaggerating the anti-imperial, because this is Hong Kong. It's not China, and they're like under
Hmm.
British rule, and the British are controlling. And so, see, there's a subversive message constantly. That's the kind of subversive cinema people, we need in the U.S.
Yeah, I love it. And the subversive cinema from Japan during occupation, during the U.S.
Mm,
military
mm.
occupation, the way that they could talk about the atom bomb through Godzilla movies, which was sort of the hidden message. Yeah, wonderful.
But I think that's part of the bounded rationality. Is we don't always see now, not we, but the public, they're not offered. You can go, you can say, well, you can go to Netflix and get the latest Japanese film. Okay, but it's not the same as going to a theater. We got a minute. Well,
Hmm.
I came to New York and said, this is going to be a paradise, because I came up in the small town of Chicago. But I get to New York and I go to a movie theater, the Elgin, and they said, once a week we show the masterpieces of samurai. So I go in, hey, gee, the whole audience is like white and Hispanic, right? There's no Japanese in the audience. I'm watching, suddenly a guy walks on, cheering. He's a famous. I didn't know who the hell is famous samurai. The whole audience is clapping and cheering. So they became experts in samurai films. So that's the kind of cultural broadening that we don't have. And this is in the theater. You can sit at home and watch a samurai film, but I think we need this cultural broadening. We got you're bringing that back to the world, and we need, by your guests and your proselytizing, your great singing and songs. You've traveled around the world. I see from your songs to Genoa, etc. So we need a cultural broadening. We don't, how we're going to
Yeah.
do it. We're going to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Good plan. Hopefully we can do it in physical spaces soon too. Jim, thanks
Yep.
so much for joining me. It's been a great pleasure.
No, you're very inspiring. I can't remember. I actually don't remember the exact details of the article you brought up, But I'm glad
It was a good one.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'll
You should
I'll
read
find a
it.
link to it. It was in
Okay.
the 2007. Yeah, just look up Jim Feast. Go to fifthestate.org and look up Jim Feast, and there you'll find author pages. I'm just telling this to all the listeners. That article from 2007 is the one I was talking about. Fantastic article, but yeah, so are the rest of them.
Well, your
Thanks, Jim. I'll
show has
talk
been
to
a
you soon.
fantastic message to the world, and people keep on doing, keep on singing, keep on marching.
Will do. You
Mm,
too.
mm.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
And thanks for tuning in to this discussion with Jim Feast in Brooklyn, New York. You can find it archived in both video and audio form at fifthestate.org, where you can also subscribe to physical publication, Fifth Estate. And you can also find these broadcasts on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/drovics, or if you look up the podcast This Week with David Rovics, wherever you get your podcasts, or go to davidrovics.com/thisweek. All right. It's even on the David Rovics mobile app if you want to do such a thing. All right. Remember, mutual aid will get us through. Don't pay the rent. Trust your neighbors.